Yes, thank you very much. That's of galaxies indeed. So thank you all for having me such late in the week and late in the day. My name is Sarah Casura. I'm a postdoc at the University of Hamburg, and I work quite closely with Jochen Liske and Aaron Robotham in Australia. Jochen is also in Hamburg. So that's why I put their names here. And I'm going to tell you about the Bulge-disk decomposition of KiDS and Viking data in the nearby universe. Or how I like to call it, about decomposing galaxies. And I quite like this background picture that was provided here by the ESO, by the conference organizers, because it has like a few nice galaxies in the background. You can see some ellipticals up here in the corner, nice beautiful spiral down here. Let me just add to this beautiful picture of a edge-on spiral galaxy that's NGC 4565 from also an ESO image. And you can very clearly see in that picture the bulge at the center and the disk that is sort of flattened and much more structure and rotates. Well, and is more extended and bluer and has more dust and gas. And it's just different from the bulge in general. And that's why my work aims to tell apart these two main stellar components. So basically to say, okay, which part of the light actually comes from the disk and which comes from the bulge here. What makes this hard is, of course, that the data doesn't all look like the picture I've just shown you. It looks more like this. So this is actually a random subset of the galaxies I work with. It's KiDS R-band imaging that I show here. I have a total of 13,000 galaxies in my sample. I use all 9 bands from KiDS and VIKING, so that's UGRI, ZYJ, HKS, which makes for more than 100,000 images for me to decompose. All galaxies are at a redshift of less than 0.08, sorry, that way around. So they're relatively nearby, and they're selected from the Gamma survey. Just a very quick slide on the Gamma survey. It's popped up every here and then during the week, but in case not everybody knows, Gamma is a spectroscopic survey at heart that is sort of intermediate in terms of width and depth. Well, in addition to the spectroscopy, which is the important part for me, the Gamma team has collected about photometry in more than 20 bands, basically by convincing other surveys to observe the Gamma fields. And 2 of these surveys were KiDS and VIKING. I don't need to introduce them here to this audience, but I left this slide in just to point out that there is a slight difference in the data products we use between KiDS and VIKING. So for KiDS, we actually use the 1 degree squared stacked tiles, the science tiles. For VIKING, we decided to stay at the individual chip level, which has important consequences for our processing, and which is just to avoid some PSF uncertainties, essentially. So I'll walk you through my pipeline, but I'll be very quick because I really want to leave some time at the end for like the sort of science that we can do with this, the resulting catalog, essentially. So step 1 of my pipeline is the pre-processing. We use Profound for that, which is an image analysis package written by Aaron Robotham. We use it to define the segmentation map, of which you can see an example here, and also for the PSF estimation, background subtraction, obtaining initial guesses. Then we fit the galaxies. Each galaxy is fitted with 3 different models with the Bayesian 2-dimensional profile fitting code Profit, which is also written by Aaron Robotham. And Profit is quite flexible, has lots of choices that you can make, and does a good job in fitting galaxies. So here's an example where you can see the data on the left, then the model that we fitted to this galaxy in the center, and the residual on the right. And the model here is actually made up of a bulge model and a disk model that are added together. So this is what I mean by bulge-disk decomposition. Now we actually fit not only bulge and disk models to each galaxy, but we fit 3 models to each galaxy. That's a single Cirsic, a Cirsic bulge plus exponential disk, and a point source bulge plus exponential disk, just to capture some of the unresolved bulges. And then what's probably the main novelty of my pipeline is that we do simultaneous fits to all images of a band, and that comes back to us staying at the chip level for the VIKING data. So just to illustrate this a bit, here you have a galaxy, a random galaxy, I think it's gamma ID 544 or something. And from top to bottom, going down here, you have the 9 bands. And in the kids bands, UGRI, the top 4 here, we usually have, like, because we use the science tiles, we usually have 1 image per galaxy per band. In this case, it's 2 because it happens to sit in an overlap region between the kids tiles, but usually it's 1 or maybe it's sometimes 2. For Viking, because we use individual chips, we have a lot of images per band. So what we do with those is to fit them simultaneously with the same model. So here's an illustration of that, where we have like all the images in the Z band as an example. Then we have a single model for this galaxy that is convolved with the appropriate PSF and taking into account the pixel scale, background subtraction, whatever, for each of these individual images, to then make a model image that matches each of these individual images. And like that, we can fit the galaxy taking full advantage of the depth without having to introduce uncertainties by stacking. Right, and then the last step in our pipeline is some quite extensive post-processing that we do, which includes the flagging of bad fits and model selection to basically determine which of the 3 models we fitted is most appropriate for each galaxy, or whether none of them are appropriate. Then, okay, just to summarize the distinguishing features again, we use the most recent data, from KiDS and VIKING. We have some new code, Profound and Profit. We do a full MCMC, all steps are automated, including the preparatory work and everything. We have a point source bulge plus exponential disk model to capture unresolved bulges in a sort of consistent way. We do simultaneous fits to all images of a band, but independent fits in all bands, which allows us to study this structural parameters as a function of wavelength. And we do quite extensive post-processing, including the flagging of outliers, model selection, assessing systematic uncertainties. Right, our main result is a catalog of Bulge-disk decompositions. I won't drop the catalog onto you because it's got 13,000 rows and I don't know how many columns. But here's a screenshot of the Gamma webpage where the catalog is actually published. Well, sort of, it's on the Team Gamma base for now, but you know, it is real. It's not just hidden somewhere. Here's a visual representation of some of the information contained in the catalog. So this is a distribution of the sizes of galaxies, their effective radii, for all galaxies in black, for the single component galaxies in yellow, and then for bulges and disks in red and blue, respectively, for galaxies that actually contain 2 components. Some galaxies don't. Now let's add to this the 2 other main parameters of the Sersic function, which are the Sersic index and the magnitude. And so this is a representation of the R band, and then I told you we did this for all 9 bands. So here's a full representation of the structural parameters contained in the catalog. Plus then we have lots of information on quality control and some plots and documentation, etc. Right, so quality control, how did we ensure it was actually robust? So it starts, of course, with some visual inspection of fits. You can look at some parameter distributions. So if we go back at this one, for example, you can, for example, see the disks are typically larger than bulges. So that's reassuring because that's what we'd expect. You can also see some selection effects because all the single Sersic objects tend to be the smaller ones, and some of the larger objects can be successfully decomposed into bulges and disks. Then you can also look at trends with wavelength. So here's a very quick plot of the distribution of bulge to total ratios, and you see for the GR and I bands, and you see as a function of wavelength, the prominence of bulges increases, as you would expect. You can compare to other works, of course. So here's actually a figure from one of Boris's paper, because Boris does a very similar bulge-disk decomposition work. With, you know, slightly different focus and a slightly different sample, but some of the sample overlaps. And so here's a comparison from his paper between his work and my work. And there's some differences which we discussed and we think we understand, but mostly it's in agreement. Here's another similar plot that I won't go into depth either. It's just from a paper that Aaron wrote where he did similar things. Then you can also look at things like the mass size relation, so derived properties. And so here I just want you to take away from that plot. So the points are my data and the lines are not a fit to the data. They are taken from the study of Lange et al. 2015. So we get quite good agreement in some scaling relations. And then I don't expect you to read this table, but we did do a detailed investigation into systematic uncertainties and biases with the overlap sample and some simulations that we did exactly for that purpose. And I can tell you biases are below 1% in all parameters. And the systematic errors are a factor of 2 to 3 larger than the random errors from the MCMC alone. So now that we know this, we can take it into account, of course. Right, then what can you do with a catalog of robust structural parameters? So here's just a few things that my collaborators have been doing. So this is from Shri O. She's in the SAMI survey, so IFU survey. And she used my Bulge-disk decompositions as a constraint to then do kinematic decompositions of the SAMI galaxies. And then Stefania Barsanti, also in SAMI, used this to then study the alignment of galaxy spins and the cosmic web filaments, which she found out depends on the mass of the bulge. And then a bit closer to gamma, Stephen Phillips did a study of the surface star formation rate dependence on surface brightness. And there's lots more which I don't want to talk about now. But my most recent project that I'll just flag up here is a sort of a little spin-off, essentially, where we try to estimate the supermassive black hole masses from ground-based optical imaging alone for type 1 AGN, for a small sample of type 1 AGN in gamma. And so I try to do this by multi-component AGN plus host decomposition, when then converting the Sersic index to a supermassive black hole mass according to this relation that was calibrated on higher resolution space-based HSD data. And well, it sort of works, not quite as well as we would have hoped to, because we're really pushing the resolution limit here. But yeah, we compare this to a supermassive black hole estimate from obtained from the gamma spectra. That's why I put Dragana's image here, because it was in close collaboration with Dragana, who was a visiting professor at Hamburg for the last 3 years. And yeah, this is just a paper we submitted some 3 weeks ago. Now, what I really want to get at with this catalog, what I want to do next, and which is actually just a proposal for funding that I'm submitting like by the end of the month, is to study the internal dust attenuation. And this was actually the motivation for performing Bulge-disk decompositions in the first place. So here's just a plot from this relatively old study now, from Driver et al. 2007, where you can see the attenuation as a function of inclination for disks and bulges. And you can see for high inclinations, it's actually quite severe, up to 1 mag or 1.5 mag. I think Bogdan in his next talk will, talk a lot more about this as well. But here's the same information from a simulation, essentially, where you can see, so it depends on inclination, it depends on wavelength, of course, it's much less bad in the K band as it is in the B band, and it depends on the geometry, so that's why we need Bulge-disk decompositions to do this properly. We need inclinations, so we need actual disk axle ratios, and we need a broad wavelength coverage. UGRI, ZYJ, HKS is what we have from my catalog. And then from gamma, we have also ancillary data covering the far UV to far infrared. That doesn't have the detailed structural decompositions, but it can be used as sort of additional data points at least. Right. And so we have we can study. We have measurements of luminosities, color, sizes, the SED, structural parameters, concentration, shape, whatever, plus all the ancillary measurements in gamma that have like the environmental metrics and stellar masses and whatever. So we can compare the trends in all of these things to the radiative transfer model of Tafts and Popescu, Richard and Christina, our main collaborators on this proposed project, and that puts us in quite a unique position to really constrain the dust properties for individual galaxies, for their bulges and their disks, as a function of inclination, as a function of wavelength, and for different galaxy types, properties, environment, really for a large statistical sample, which then even allows us to sort of reverse engineer and test the radiative transfer model in the first place, and also to test other attenuation correction methods, and of course the main aim to derive intrinsic properties of galaxies that are properly dust corrected in a sort of self-consistent way, and which will allow us to derive much better like luminosity functions, color magnitude diagrams, anything you like, just properly corrected for dust. Right, and that already takes me to the end of my talk. So I leave the summary here. We decomposed 13,000 galaxies in 9 bands in a fully automated 3-step pipeline, with the main novelty being the multi-frame fits. We've done some extensive quality control, and the catalog has wide applicability, of which I just flagged a few. And what I want to do next is study the dust attenuation. And then, of course, also we want to move from gamma to waves, where waves is essentially like gamma on steroids, is what it's always called. So we can just apply the same pipeline, since it's fully automated, and actually the optical and near-infrared data for waves also will be KiDS and VIKING. So it will be trivial for us to just increase our sample size by a factor of 5 or so. Okay, that was it. Thank you very much for your attention.